There's a new, friendlier and kinder type of divorce gaining ground around the country. It's called collaborative divorce. It's part of a growing legal movement that's changing from an adversarial approach to a more healing or counseling approach to the practice of law. And as producer Pam White reports in our cover story, it's especially relative to divorce, which affects about 1 million children a year.
And then 7 years after that.
So, you were a failure at the one most important relationship in your life.
Objects. Overruled. The witness's opinion on this is relevant.
The unforgettable Kramer versus Kramer, a classic example of how unnerving and painful traditional divorce proceedings can be.
Were you a failure at the one most important relationship in your life? Were you?
The process itself, which is designed for a fight, is kind of pushing them down into their anger, into their bitterness. Collaborative is designed to hold them up, to give them a place in which to feel safe.
His divorce was so bitter, Roy Martin became a divorce lawyer, hoping to make it a better experience for other couples. But besides the traditional way, there weren't many options until he learned about a kinder, gentler approach called collaborative divorce.
I like to think of it as being a lot like whitewater rafting. If you think of everybody in the same boat, with both clients, paddling and both attorneys steering, and if everybody works together, we're going to make it down to the bottom of the river.
It's a team effort. However, in the collaborative process, each party has his own attorney, and they all sign a legally binding contract in which they agree they're not going to take the case to court.
What happens when that agreement is in place is it totally changes the dynamic of a divorce, because suddenly, instead of being adversarial, instead of, our team versus their team, suddenly we're all on the same team. And it's not going to work for anyone unless it works for everyone.
I think it's the difference between coming to an agreement versus thinking you're fighting a war.
Dawn and Brad Story were married for 13 years and have 2 daughters. When they decided to go their separate ways, they wanted to find a means that wouldn't take a toll on them or their children.
In the divorce process, I felt like Brad's lawyer was taking care of me as much as my lawyer, and making sure that I could make it financially and have a nice place for the girls to live. And I think that makes me want to be good to Brad, in that I felt very taken care of in the process.
To resolve differences, meetings take place between both parties and their lawyers. How many meetings are necessary depends on the case.
You are always meeting together with both lawyers and both spouses together, and that's quite different. There's never any private strategy conversations, and so you do feel like you can trust the process.
I recall in my own divorce, every day, approaching that mailbox with such dread, with such fear and trepidation, not knowing what to expect. In collaborative, you know what to expect.
Unlike mediation, where a third party helps the couple come to an agreement, at collaborative meetings, the options are infinite. Everyone has input, and brainstorming and creative ideas are encouraged to resolve differences. Experts can be called in to help in the process, such as financial planners or therapists.
Big difference, as I see it, has to do with the amount of stability that it provides for all the parties involved in the divorce, especially the children, if there are any.
Psychologist Dr. Brian Walker has been involved in cases and is a strong believer in the collaborative method because he says children have a say in the matter.
And that's exactly what happened in this case. I'm sure the divorcing couples had their issues, but each of them met individually with their child in my office, and each of them was equally invested in the child and the child's well-being. I was very impressed.
So this is a traditional courtroom, and although every traditional case doesn't necessarily wind up in court, because often they do settle, the threat is always there that such a case will wind up in court. And the petitioner sits on one side, the respondent and sits on the other side, each with their attorneys. It's basically designed to be adversarial. The judge sits up there, and the the witnesses sit over there in the witness chair. Each party will generally have to testify, and it can be a very unnerving experience for people. In a collaborative case, all the action takes place in a room like this, in a conference room, you know, with both clients and both attorneys sitting around the table, very often the clients sitting next to each other. And because they know that the case is never going to have to go to court, everybody can be relaxed and everybody can, you know, it's much easier for people to work together.
Martin says there are 15 lawyers in Tucson trained in collaborative law, a type of law devised by a disgruntled divorce lawyer.
It started initially in Minnesota. There was an attorney there who was ready to just throw in the towel and give up his practice because he was so sick of doing cases the traditional way.
What Martin likes about it, attorneys who are trained to work with tangible things also get to work on the intangibles.
You know, it's easy to have an actuary come in and value the pension plan, but what is it worth to be able to dance at your daughter's wedding?
Depending on the situation, collaborative divorce is often less expensive than a traditional one. Martin's handled more than a dozen cases, but he says it's not for everyone. For instance, if a couple is too angry and vindictive, it won't work. But for Dawn and Brad, who wanted to end their marriage amicably and with dignity, collaboration was the perfect solution.
You know, even when you finally do get the final legal papers, it's odd to see that of, you know, you versus the other person. And you know, that even seeing that on the paperwork is not representative of what I felt in the process.
Everybody that I talk to that's in the process of divorce or thinking about divorce, I mention the availability of this option, and sometimes their mouths drop open, having not heard of anything like this before, and they said, well, that's exactly what we would like to do.
And even though it's a divorce, not a marriage, many couples go on to live happily ever after.
You know, they came into this marriage wanting to spend their lives together. It didn't work out, but when you can work together as a team to take things apart and put them back together in a new way that works, well then, you know, people can still feel really good about each other. And that's really beautiful.
For more information, call Roy Martin at 628-8900 or log on to the Collaborative Law Group of Southern Arizona at divorcewisely.com.